I will bring you now on a journey through a personal project that I did in the last 4 months in free time, where I've tried to understand how I want to work and in what way Blender can help us to avoid all that fuss, all that overthinking, all that weight on our shoulders. So, I'm showing you a personal project because first, I cannot show yet stuff from CAG concept, but I haven't started from enough time. And second, because it's fun and it's a great opportunity for you to study things that you might implement in your work. That if you experiment while you work, you risk a lot, while personal projects are absolutely risk-free. Maybe it's me, I find very fun that's the way I rest, modeling and drawing and playing Elden Rings. So one of the first things I did, I just set some limit. So I wanted a multi-crew ship. I wanted the main body to carry a miner for terraforming. I wanted a mechanical, chunky, brutal, moving look, and I wanted it to look absolutely relatable to a close future, not something sci-fi in Halo style. Also, worth mentioning, I just had mesh machine, decal machine, and the physical skylight. Of course, there is the North Wrangler, is already there in the Blender package, you just have to activate it. I tried to make a breakdown of what I can do on Blender and where I have to go elsewhere, and I decided to keep my workflow just on Blender, avoiding Marvelous. I mean, it's free, why should I pay other stuff? And I did a first sketch. I decided to inspire to a sketch I did of an astronaut a year before. That went very successful. One of the few designs that I've done that was not looking old after 1 year to my eyes. So I tried to make some weird sketch, some photo bash, just to find out what was the direction these had to go. I started blocking out with very simple shape what could have been the initial shape of the... Okay, so those are done just in little shapes, couple of bevels, not a lot of polys. The main problem with this kind of stuff is that I couldn't sell the sense of scale, and I will spoil it now, I failed it. The final result will look smaller than what I wanted. So with the grease pencil on Blender, you basically draw strokes in 2D. Then you can add another dimension and start moving them with the soft brush for creating different kind of shapes. And the final result is basically a moving sketch in 3D. If you separate these objects, you can start arranging them according to your taste, creating repetitions, and using what you use generally for modeling in a more quick and fast way. And from this, we can pass to different kind of design. So in this case, I just arranged different pieces together to find what was the version that I was liking the most. And after that, I would go and create different copies of the same strokes, apply the symmetrical modifier on it, use some as curve and some as mesh. The some as curve become a frame, the mesh become the filling part. And basically, all I do here is looking for happy errors. The amount of poly in this case is capable of creating weird shapes, weird triangulation, a bit of the Lamborghini language, all triangular and quite aggressive shape. So it gets quite different from the more clean and soft way of creating blockouts. So I don't care too much about negative space. This is just surface, and that I will mix and assimilate with the frame overlapping over it. I will take the curve options, and I will give it both a geometry that let it become a pipe, and I will extrude it so it becomes a rectangle. It's very easy in this case to start reading that this is a big thing. keep through. Once created certain elements, I will start with repetitions that are a fundamental part of sense of scale. Generally, newbies on spaceships take the repetition in a very not musical way, so tap, 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 tap is boring. You can do different things with different rhythm, ta tap, ta tap, 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 and everything will start being will be more consistent and deep, with different levels of details and different level of repetitions. It's also very easy to take a very bad done ellipse, give it a modifier with the spherify, and just obtain details from it. That's an example of creating detail from nothing. Slow it. It's also quite common that when I'm doing this part, I take pieces that I've liked from other blockout that I created and just throw them in my actual blockout. What's the final result? So going without being too boring. Is that you can have something that from far looks much more detailed than a thing done with a bunch of shapes. So you can already start selling some of the feature of your design, where the weapons are going, where the thrusters are, where do you want that noise to be. Another thing that I haven't shown here, but it's quite useful for understanding where is your detail going, is looking at it in wireframe. So where it will be darker, you know that you put more stuff in there. I use a set of modifiers that help me through the process that can go even to the end, being quite useful. The first one are absolutely the bevel and the weight and normals. The bevel just put a normal chamfer without you to need to model it, and weight and normals just simulate an eye poly where there is not. So instead of having these chunky looking faces, that modifier will find the biggest one and will maintain them flat, not in favor of the smaller faces. Easy way to use it is quite intuitive. You can also use it by the angle, it's just less controllable, but in the end, what you will have is that a lot of controllability and a lower poly count. In the end, the poly count will be the same if you did it manually or not, but if I have to go back and change this shape and modify something, this makes your life much easier. You can use as well modifiers to create frames that can be used then for Vrex, for creating marketing scenes. I generally take my final shape when I have a big piece that I want to wreck. I do a remesh, like on ZBrush, and to that remesh I apply those modifiers. So the first is a triangulation, the second is a wireframe, quite simple, and in the end we just put again the bevel and the weight and normals. Can be amazing for making shots of interiors in the Star Wars illustration kind of style. I am someone who loves things that move. So I've done some experiment on the bottom part of my spaceship, and this was the first attempt, which I didn't like because the excess of movement was unselling the sense of scale. This is different meters, so I decided to go in another direction with this design and did something a little simpler and clean, but in my opinion sells better the sense of scale. So basically this should be a miner that use microwaves to melt the mantle of Mars. I don't know about science, so don't bother. And the other part was the main body, and I was studying a way this stuff could lift heavy stuff. and at the same time looking very cool when it lands. So there is the fly mode that has those two stages, one for lifting off and the other one that you saw just seconds ago for going. This was my first attempt for a position for landing that I scrapped because it made absolutely no sense. And I went for something that makes even less sense, but is cooler. And here is one of my favorite parts. So Blender gave us the possibility of working with nodes. I think it's amazing. I have a lot of fun working with nodes. And I want to give you a little example of, basically, I try to understand what I do on Photoshop after I generally finish a render and how can I avoid to do that without making physically correct things, but that look cool. So this is a very normal trim sheet material with some plates with a node that is much less tidy than the ones that Till showed yesterday. This one is for scratches, but the cool thing about this stuff is that they are interactable. So based on the geometry, they can change or show me masks. So I use this mask for scratches. The second one is a very normal AO bake, just with the color to give a better understanding of the fact that they might be rust and stuff. Another scratch pass, but more for rust, and this one for the fuel leaks. Fuel leaks are cool because they change color based on your point of view related to the surface, so I need to use a Fresnel. You can adjust it, and this is a very simple thing, but I always thought, why I do this in Photoshop when I can spend 1 minute, let's say 30 minutes today, and never do this again. And I can use a slide to decide how much I want it to be looked. Then I applied a second material on the UV2 that generally were used in the old gen engine for making shadows, in Star Citizen are used for the damage, but unwrapping again in face view can just help me to make the stripes of a material re-entering atmosphere or that get burned, and this can be applied to so many things that are not just these burning stripes. It is incredibly useful how much energy I'm saving just doing this stuff. And the final one was actually the wrinkles of the plate. So I felt in love with the picture of the Starship from SpaceX, and I absolutely wanted to do that, but I didn't find a texture online that had the wrinkles of bent metal. So I've used actually a texture of jeans from Megascan, and I applied it over metal, and I used the denoiser to remove the noise created from the fibers. And the result with a slider is that I can decide how old my spaceship look. And one more, just still with a slider, to decide how wet my spaceship look. And I never have to do this stuff again because I have a material that does it for myself, and I just have to change a slider. So basically all of this is about creating automatization. Feel free to make pictures. I will slide through quickly through this one. Worth to mention Rasmus Bussen, that I hope I didn't destroy your name, who actually get inspired by for this node setup. The one for the rust, the one for the stripes on UV2, and the one for the fuel leaks or the heat leaks. And in the end, they don't look bad at all. I have different ones, some with lines, some without. So generally when I have quads, I unwrap on the left, and when I don't have quads and I want to do a quick unwrap, I unwrap on the right, so I don't lose all my time making unwrapping, because it's one of the most frustrating things that someone can do, especially if it's not specialized on this kind of 3D stuff. I'm lucky that I've done a couple of years in production, but I don't think it's so difficult to... You can unwrap bad and still have a good result. I suggest everyone I talk about this kind of stuff to project the rough map through Cubic, because in that way, when you repeat an element, the details, the dust, the dirt, will not repeat with the element itself and will avoid that very boring video game look. I have one for tiles that is done with I took tiles from Quixel Bridge. I applied the typical text of the shuttle, and I've used a checker texture in the Blender nodes just to give some variety and avoid boring stuff. While this on the left is my favorite material for making gribbles. Why wasting literally millions of polys when I can use a texture in this huge scale? I don't need geometry for this stuff. It will make my life easier. And these are some of my set of textures. So we have some stuff taken from CG Texture. I made the alpha myself for the cables. Some stuff for just details for interior, details taken from the NASA website that are credit-free, so you can use them for commercial purpose. I've bought some tool with just fabric. I dispose them in horizontal sheets, and I made a render with just the normals, so I use that instead of going on Marvelous Designer or making simulation, because it makes it so much easier. If I have to make a pipe, a foil pipe, it's crazy to think that you can go on Marvelous Designer. It's cool. I'm not saying it's not. But if my art director asks me to change something, I just go on the balcony and kill myself. So in the time I have built a library with this texture, as you can see, like this one is literally a box. I'm wrapped on some case. It's the Ian Uber style, someone call it. I suggest everyone to try his Patreon because he has amazing tutorials. Again, the rough map and the dirt always come through cubics, so the repetition is not visible. And I use this library that I've built in time to detail my projects. I generally start with a screenshot of a clean version of something that I like, do a couple of passes in Photoshop. These are generally just for me. I don't really share this stuff on ArtStation because I don't know, it's rough. Did the same with the miner. Tried just to understand what I want. This is quite a failing. And anyway, I passed from this result, the total look of the spaceship, to something more clean and consistent. And once we applied the materials we talked earlier, that are not a lot, and that interact with each other because they have the AO that doesn't need a bake, we can have quite a smooth result. Plus, I don't know why I put this animation here, but yeah, there are interiors. And once I apply those materials on stuff I already have, I can have smooth, good-looking, very light props and parts of my spaceship. These are the Beatles engine, and those pipes have a section of, it's just a square. It's literally nothing special, but it looks cool thanks to the trim sheet. Same for the biggest engine of the ship that goes on the bottom of the bottom legs. Everything is brought a bit together with the fabric, makes everything smoother and more pleasant to look at. And those are the renders that just came out from Blender. So generally, in this moment, I would just go on Photoshop and start cleaning up a bit, making the rim light, giving the background a sense. And I thought, why don't we try to do this stuff directly in Blender again? So this is my setup that always changes, but it's nice to have it on Blender because you can use this for videos. So what I did here is that I put a lens dirt masked through an ellipse blurred, so basically a vignetting, inverted. So the lens dirt only appears on the border of your render. And I also masked through an enhanced blurred version of the glare. so that it appears just when the render is brighter. And the result is exactly what I would have done in Photoshop. So I arrived at this point that something was still missing, and I thought, let's animate the camera and activate the motion blur. If you scale the length of the animation, you will scale also the motion blur, so you can have a more catchy render. And the only thing at that point that I haven't understand how to do yet is the stripes of smoke coming out from the reactors. But all of this is not touched by Photoshop, and is not difficult to do. It's not a simulation. It's not something you need to know Udini or need to be a genius. I mean, look at my face. It's simple stuff. There's a shot of the miner. I try also through the nodes you can have an HDRI, but just show a background. There's nothing special. Keyshot does it from 2007. But it's nice to try and contextualize things in different way, try to give in a narration. We all know that this is Saturn, etc. Also maybe it's good to sell sense of scale. But since I had done all this job, since I have done all this work on the compositor, I thought, can I animate? So this is the result in Eevee. If you don't use Blender, Eevee is basically an Unreal Engine kind of a real-time engine, and Cycles is the one that looks more like Arnold or Octane, but not as cool as Octane. And this is the result. It's very noisy, it's flickery. I wasn't satisfied, but as I did all that job for making all this stuff with 6 materials, I thought, can I do something with Cycles? And the result is, spoiler, yes, you can do something with Cycles, because with all that optimization in Full HD, I could make every frame in 25 seconds. So it took me a couple of hours with a decent computer, not gonna lie, i9 and 2080s, but still not a beast with 3090. So I'm quite satisfied with the result. The looking is much softer than Eevee, especially because Cycles supports the node lights. So you can have, instead of a square for an area light, you can have a texture applied, a gobo, as it was used to call in real life cinematics, that can make things smoother, harder, or give a texture like webs or more like IES. And I think that I still have an animation that I've done with Eevee in this case. So there are still movements in the camera I don't like, but the general effect works quite well. It's not hypolisson, it's not difficult to move all the stuff because the details come from the image. It's just the camera makes me vomit a bit. It's a bit shaky. The same approach can be used also on smaller props. As long as it's not organic, it's going to be absolutely fine if you use AO or scratches on smaller props. Why not? Let's keep in mind that the suit is a modified version from Albin Merle, a Paris artist that does amazing simulation on Marvelous Designer. So the only case I really had to use Photoshop was actually setting my spaceship somewhere. So this is an example where a bit of control on lights and especially the smoke stripes on the bottom were actually almost impossible to simulate in Blender without spending too many days on it. I need something that I can reuse. Especially in vehicle art, you will find yourself making a lot of renders for your directors, for his director, and you don't want to take 30 pieces and post-produce all of them. If you can, it's easy to automatize it, and since you already have a decent model, you can just give it to production, and they will not have to swear for years for making this real. Some version with different environments and more rocks. The stuff still doesn't work very well. I think there must be more job done on the composition and on the compositor to separate the layers because the values are a bit boring. But I find successful in particular a couple of shots. that didn't request that much of work in Photoshop. This is a more promotional one. I'm not particularly happy, but this is probably my favorite. A little sketch done with Photoshop again in the beginning to understand what kind of composition I want. And then you can see in the GIF all the steps that brought me there. The rocks are done with Megascans material. And the rest is basically come from a library that I've built in years of work and years of optimization. I've done Macs, why not put in a Mac there? I have a lot of colonization outposts, I would call them. Yeah, that's it.